Hello, everyone who joins in with me live in this now moment, which will give a few seconds here for people to scroll and for this message to appear on your feed. And for everyone who joins in the future now moments, appreciating you all. Hey Nana, hey Jen, hey Rick, and everyone else who's starting to filter in. There's a little bit of a delay on Facebook showing who's joining. That said, I'm going to be sharing about something that, gosh, has just been really sitting on my heart for the last few days, few weeks, a few months. And last night it became very apparent as I was reading a post that I just needed to share about this. So appreciate everyone who's coming in to be a part of this transmission. So there's a lot of conversation happening right now around this rape culture. And it really kicked off with the Me Too movement. And first and foremost, I want to express that this is in no way disqualifying any movements. This is going to be an energetic look at what's really happening beneath the surface. And the intention is to unify and not to separate. So what I see happening in a lot of this movement's energetics has been a blaming and a shaming and a guilting of people feeling victims to experiences, to situations that have happened to them, and wanting to be seen and heard and loved. And that's totally, totally okay. What I want to talk about is why we even have such a thing as rape culture. Why we even have this movement of Me Too, right? This movement Me Too came from this rape culture that we've been experiencing. And it really goes so much deeper than just this rape against women. It's rape against men, it's sexual molestation of children, right? There is this deep, deep pain that's on the planet that is creating a lot of experiences that I know most of us would rather not be having. So the one common thread that is really being seen, that's not really being spoken about, well, there's actually a few that we're going to talk about today. One is about alcohol and what I like to call the devil's elixir, liquid poison, and its role in this rape culture that we are experiencing. And really what's happening on the planet is that we've got a bunch of wounded children running around in adult bodies. And because we were never educated on how to process our emotions, how to process pain, how to process trauma, how to process what's going on in our mind, and all of that got deeply suppressed within us, children stay wounded. And those children don't grow up. They stay wounded and they start to live in adult bodies. And what ends up happening is that these wounded children living in adult bodies start to find ways to mask the deep amount of pain that they're feeling. And one of the main ways that's currently used on this planet to mask that deeper pain is alcohol. The other is drugs, illegal drug use. Cannabis is one of them, right? And tobacco is another one. These substances that alter our brain chemistry in some way and alter our ability to make clear and conscious decisions for ourselves. And decisions get made when we're on these altered substances that we would never make if we were in a clear-headed space. So what I am sharing about is to really acknowledge all of our roles in this rape culture. Because blaming men is not the answer. Shaming women is not the answer. because that creates and continues to facilitate the divide between men and women, the divide between what we call genders. And if we continue to balance out this divide by perpetuating it, by feeding it, by creating more and more reasons to separate us, then we are going to create mass destruction on this planet, because destruction is created through separation. And the cabal, and if you don't know what I mean by cabal, I highly recommend you start Googling and start educating yourself on the beings on this planet that have had an agenda for a very long time to separate in order to control. And a part of that agenda has been to maintain the separation between men and women. Because when men and women are separated, then we play out the shadow of the 37th gene, which is that the weak dominate, or the strong dominate the weak. And the way that that has been appeared at the shadow level is that men dominate women because they're physically stronger. Or that was what we at least believed, because that was what the programming that you're picking up on television, on media, on music, on all these different platforms was penetrating into your subconscious and programming this belief that men are stronger than women. And in that 37th shadow, the stronger dominate the weak. And as we transition out of this patriarchal way of living, not into a matriarchy. We've been in a matriarchy before. Go back to your ancient memories of the Egyptian timelines, when it was a matriarchy that was running the planet, and where men were slaves to women. Go back into those timelines. We've been in those timelines before, and they are not in the highest and best either. For us to really evolve, we must shift into a synarchy, where all beings are equal, where there is no dominance, where it's equality and harmony and heterarchy over hierarchy, right? The synarchy. And in order for us to actually shift into the synarchy, we must realize that we've been played. That we, as your everyday human being, has been played, has been manipulated at an unconscious level to perpetuate certain agendas so that the cabal, the royalty, the certain bloodlines on this planet can maintain their power and control over the people, over the money, and over the resources. And the best way to do that, to control you, is to keep you separate, to keep you feeling like you are weak, or to keep you feeling like you have to dominate others. And this agenda has continued to play itself out between men and women. So as we start to bring this into awareness and start to unpack this dynamic, we first must all acknowledge the fact that we've been played. We have been manipulated in our unconscious, and we have been programmed. And it's our time to have these conversations so that we can start to unpack and neurologically hack our brains to change our mindset and to change the way we're interrelating with each other, so that we can move towards a synarchy. Because moving into a matriarchy is not in our highest and best. Maintaining the patriarchy is not in our highest and best. Moving into synarchy, into balance, into equality, into unity, into harmony is what's going to create peace, is what's going to end war, is what's going to end poverty and starvation and the pollution of the planet. So recognizing that we've been played and then having this conversation is the key, which is why I'm being guided to have this conversation now, to start to plant alternative possibilities into the world about what's been happening so that we can reclaim our power, and so that we can see this movement that's happening now on the planet, bringing an awareness to this rape culture that has been existing, and actually dissolve it without blaming and shaming and punishing and creating more war and violence. Yet it would be this time women punishing men, which is not going to serve us. So if we now, from that awareness, have this conversation, it can be much more available for everyone to really participate in, because no one is to blame here. Men are not to blame, women are not to blame. No one is the victim here. And no one is the perpetrator or the savior. From that standpoint, we must have this common agreement in order for us to have this conversation. Because we must look within ourselves at what is creating this rape culture. Wounded children living in adult bodies that have not processed their pain, their emotional suppressions, their mental instability, that have not become consciously aware of the programs that are governing their subconsciousness. And one of the main programs that has been utilized through the patriarchy to maintain this false illusion that the man is stronger than the woman, and then perpetuates this 37th gene that at the shadow says the strong dominate the weak become slaves to the strong. This is a genetic program at a shadow frequency that operates through our entire species. And these shadow frequencies have been known by the cabal, that have been known by these powerful elite that has been utilizing these mechanisms, these agendas for control to separate us. And in that separation, we see this core, the core of this rape culture, the core of this programmed belief that has said that men are stronger than women, and it really stems from a lot of the sacred texts that are on this planet. Maybe you're aware of the fact that the Bible was pieced together by the Christian church based on what they would find to validate their agenda. It's not all the Gospels that were written during Jesus's time. It's not all of the pieces of information which you would know if you studied the Gnostic texts. It was taken information that would be able to propel an agenda. And that agenda during the patriarchy was that men needed to be stronger than women and to dominate them. So right in Genesis, you hear that Eve was essentially the root of evil, so that women were bad and wrong and should be enslaved. And you don't take my word for it, go to Genesis and read it for yourself. I'm paraphrasing what that says. And that is at the core of this agenda, to keep men and women separate, to keep men in power. But it has nothing to do with men. It has to do with these elite agendas to separate and control and dominate us. So we cannot blame men for having been programmed. This is the reason why looking at your mindset, rewiring the neurological pathways of your unconscious needs to be the absolute number one thing that you're focusing now on in your life, and the number one thing that you're sharing with others. Because we must unwire these programs that have created this rape culture to begin with. We must deprogram and implement new strategies and new programs into our unconscious that are more in alignment with synarchy than with dominance and control. And in order for us to do that, we have to be aware that they even exist. And that's what this conversation is about now, awareness that these programs exist. So through our acknowledgement and through beginning to start to unpack these programs, through looking at the unconscious parts of us that have validated these programs in some way through our life experiences, and then start to rewire them. Now, this is something that I've been doing for a very long time, because there was a long period, a big chunk of my life where I abused alcohol because I was molested as a child and then began to abuse my body. And a lot of people, if they read a lot of my stories, they would think that I potentially had been raped many times in college. And I would never say that, because I acknowledge my role in that. My role to choose to black out on alcohol because I hadn't processed the deep pain inside of me that allowed me to violate this body. So from that perspective, we must acknowledge the tools that have been used, that have been allowed to stay legal on this plane to continue to perpetuate that separate journey. And one of them is alcohol. A lot of these stories that are coming out, when you read them, when you dive into them, and not all of them, I'm saying a lot of them, alcohol is involved. There was a point where the lines were blurred. where people didn't know really what was happening. Because when you're that drunk, your inhibitions are gone. You black out. And when you're blacked out, and this is going to trigger people who drink a lot of alcohol. Now, I'm 2 years sober. So this is something that's not a part of my life anymore, and it will never be again. I consider the vast majority of people in this world to be alcoholics. And an alcoholic is someone who has a drink a day, who needs to have that drink to somehow unwind themselves from their life, to somehow shut down parts of themselves that they are not really willing to feel. Whether that is the dullness of their life because they're living a path that's not their truth, whether that's the pain of their emotional that they've been suppressing since they were children, whether that's the dissatisfaction in their relationships and their jobs and their locations on the planet. If there is a need to have a glass of alcohol every single day or more days of the week than not, that is an addiction. It doesn't have to go as far as what, Alcoholics Anonymous talks about, where you're going to the edge and blacking out every single day. It doesn't have to go that far. If you're using a substance every day to alter your reality, that's an addiction. And this is going to trigger a lot of people who are still playing that game out. And that's okay. Because it is only through you being triggered that you recognize that there's something inside of you that is craving to use something to suppress a part of you. And I know this because I lived that for a very long time. And I've seen and supported people in getting sober for a long time now and changing their reality and going into these painful experiences that happened in their 20s, in their teens, in their childhood, or in their 30s, 40s, 50s. It doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. What matters is that there's a bunch of wounded people running around, not looking at their emotional pain, not having proper education on how to unprogram those beliefs inside of them that say, I need to dominate for power and control, or I need to give myself away to the masculine in order to become more powerful in my job. All these different programs that are playing out in our unconscious that were implemented by the cabal, by this drive to have a patriarchal world. And we must start to change them. We can only change them if we're aware of them. We can only change them if we're sober and can actually go into those neurological pathways. If we're continuing to use the substances that are perpetuating this rape culture, that are perpetuating the suppression of our pain, we're never going to move beyond this. We can bring it to the surface all we want, and it's going to still continue to happen. Still today, women are being molested, and men. If you look at the statistics, more men feel like they have been raped or sexually violated on this planet than women. And this is from statistics that you can go and Google yourself online and start to read about, right? Take this and go do your own research. This isn't a men and women conversation. This is a wounded child within program of our unconscious conversation. No one is to blame here. This isn't about separating us. This is about uniting us on the same plane that says, hey, there's something happening on this planet that is not serving our species highest and best, and begin to look at it and unpack it so that we can heal it once and for all. I understand the power of expressing. In order to heal something, we must acknowledge that it has happened. We must bring our awareness, our voice, and our truth to it. And that's what this Me Too movement is doing. It's expressing something that has been suppressed, right? Pain that has been suppressed. And I totally understand, because for 20-something years, I suppressed something and didn't talk about it to anyone that happened to me when I was 3 years old. And I understand that part of my healing journey was starting to learn that it was safe enough to actually talk about what had happened and just start to look at it from a more conscious perspective that is not possible when it's still buried deep within. And that's what this movement about Me Too is all about. That said, we must acknowledge all parts of this, all parts of what's happening, and all of us must begin to express. And in order for all of us to begin to express, we must release the victim, perpetrator, rescuer model completely from our unconscious first. that blames and shames and guilts and punishes and rescues, and look at all of our roles in this. Because in our education on this planet, we were not taught how to process our emotions. We were not taught how to navigate our conscious and unconscious mind unless we chose to go into a path of psychology, which most are not choosing. It's not a mandatory course in school. There is no mandatory courses in emotional processing. This doesn't happen. So we were programmed to absorb a massive amount of knowledge and information, yet we weren't taught how to be freaking human. So we've got a bunch of people running around with a lot of smarts, but very little awareness of how to be human, of how to self-soothe their pain and to heal their wounds and their traumas and their demons. And then what we do is we go and all that stuff stays suppressed, and we go and find things in our environment to numb that suppression. Our world would be a much different place if prohibition of alcohol had stuck. It still absolutely baffles me, though it doesn't because I know who's in power and control here making the laws, that alcohol is still something that is legally allowed to be consumed on this planet. Because of its death toll, because of how many lives it takes daily, because of all of the trauma that it creates on the planet, because of the wounds that it continues to depress. It is a depressant. And when people are wasted, when a lot of the stories that I'm hearing are, dates happened, and this isn't all of them, this is a lot of them. Dates happened, and on the date you went out to dinner, and what is date culture? Date culture is taking a woman and a man and going out to dinner and having a lot of alcohol, and because it's kind of uncomfortable to be on that first date because we weren't taught the basic understanding about how to be in a relationship with someone, how to have a conversation with someone, how to navigate our emotional and mental stability while we're interacting with someone for the first time. We weren't taught any of that. So going on a first date is very awkward and uncomfortable. So people drink even more then when they're in that awkward, uncomfortable, stressful space. And then the lines of what is and what is not get blurred. And in that blurriness, things happen that we wouldn't have said yes to if we were sober. If we were not operating from our pain body. Because a lot of people are dating from this need to find their daddy or this need to find their mommy based on if they're a man or a woman and what their relationships were like with their parents. And all of that is pain body connections. So the real conversation is to be having a dialogue about the importance for us to really develop ways to effectively learn how to navigate our emotional and our mental realities and our physical realities. Because until we do that, none of this is going to stop. And then implement these programs into education for children so that children come into this world and they know the value of their body, the value of their emotions, and the value of their mind, and how to navigate each one of those internally so that they don't carry on woundings into their future and then do things that they would never have done if they were healed whole beings. A healed whole being does not go and black out and then rape someone. A healed whole being does not go and black out and then give their body to someone because they think that in that giving, they're going to be receiving love and appreciation in a relationship. That was my story. Because it wasn't clear that sex and love were something that were very different. And this isn't clear in the vast majority of people. There isn't clarity that sex and love are two different things. And that sex does not equal love, and love does not equal sex. Because this hasn't been taught, and because media is perpetuating a different story that says Sex and love are the same thing. If he or she's not sleeping with you, they don't love you, or they're not interested in you, or they don't want you, or you're not valued. That program there, that sex and love are the same thing, creates this experience where the lines get blurred, where people go and do things and say yes to things under the influence of substances or under the influence of even food. Food changes and alters your chemistry. It alters your brain. Think about the aphrodisiacs of the world. Think about going and having a tremendous amount of oysters, feeling all turned on in your body, and mistakenly thinking that turn on is for this other person when it's really not, and saying yes to something that you really mean no to. And then 20, 30 years from then, that yes that you said yes to when you really meant no to it is still showing up in your life. And then it creates this experience of, oh my gosh, maybe that was rape. When in reality, you were under the influence of aphrodisiacs in the food and you said yes to something you really meant no to because your chemistry was altered. And that moment stays with you, especially for women, because women have an extra energetic arc line around their breast that goes from nipple to nipple. And that energetic arc line holds every single sexual encounter that woman has ever had inside of it, unless they are actively working to clear it through the tantric practices, through the Taoist practice. And I'm not talking about tantric, Western tantric sexual alchemy and sexual experiences. I'm talking about the tantric practices of the East that have nothing to do necessarily with sex. It has to do with managing your energy and having more creative life force energy inside of you so that you can ascend towards your enlightenment. Right? So cleansing that arc line, those stories stay with women forever, unless they are consciously aware that they have this energetic field. And the reason that women have it and men don't is because women carry babies inside of them. And it is like, it's that mama bear instinct is actually because there's an extra energetic arc line that men don't have, that women have because they carry life inside of them. It's a mechanism to ensure that baby is able to reach its full potential and actually come into the world. That said, what we don't have spreading truth about is that this arc line holds every single sexual experience that a woman has ever had inside of it, and that stays with her. So 20, 30, 40 years off in the distance, that experience where a yes was said when it really was a no because the chemistry was altered is still in that woman's field, impacting her emotions, impacting about how she feels about herself, and impacting the type of person that she's drawing into her reality, the type of man and woman that she's drawing into her space. Right? So having a basic understanding about the energetic mechanics of what's happening can actually help us to free this, because if women realize and start to actually cleanse this energy out of their field, they'll stop drawing in partners that are continuing to perpetuate that same story of that moment in time when she said yes and she really meant no. Which then creates this reality where she's blaming and shaming herself. And it's the same for men, where men had said yes and they really meant no. Right? This stays with us because we don't have the proper emotional processing, mental processing, energetic awareness about the deeper mechanisms that are happening when two people come together. I'm just going to pause for a moment and drop in to any questions that have come through. And if you do have any questions, feel free to share them. Alcohol is so dark, absolutely. There is a reason why alcohol is called spirits. Dark energies, entities, demonics, I'm going to use the word demon because the vast majority of the population, I want this video to be available to people that are outside of maybe an awareness of spiritual language. So let's use the word demons, dark spirits, entities. These things feed on blood. They feed on blood, so they feed on meats, and they feed on alcohol. They feed on a weakened inhibition within someone's brain that allows them an access way to move through that person and to do things through that person that they would have never done if they were not being influenced by these demons, by these dark energies. And if you don't want to acknowledge that there are dark energies in this reality, then you're living in a delusional world, and I cannot support you because you're only seeing half the picture. And if we want to really truly heal, we've got to see the whole picture. So there's a reason why alcohol, even though it has caused more deaths than any other drug, more accidents, more people incarcerated, still maintains its legality in this world, is because the people that are making the decisions are governed and run by the cabal. And it is their agenda to continue to have people be manipulated by their dark energies and their dark entities that are moving through these substances. Can you speak sometime about how to do neurological rewiring on oneself? Absolutely, Nina. I think I'm going to do a whole separate video so that people can go right to that and look at that. So I absolutely will do that. Just scrolling through any other questions that have come through. Okay. Yes, time to deal with some deeper layers of childhood trauma. This is collectively. If we, as the grown people on this planet, don't begin to look at our own childhood woundings, what type of role models are we being for the children? How could we ever tell a child how to emotionally process, how to mentally discern, and how to have physical sovereignty and energetic boundaries for their body if we as the grown adults that are the role models for these children are not embodying that ourselves? There is something missing from the collective human species, and that's honor and integrity. As a collective, now I'm not saying every single human being on the planet is missing honor and integrity. I'm saying the collective, the overall arching theme of the planet, of the human species, is lacking in honor and integrity. And you can't have honor for yourself if you're not even aware of your emotions, your mind, and your body. There can be no honor. I don't care how many honorary rewards you receive for, being in war. That doesn't mean you necessarily have true honor. True honor is honoring yourself, is honoring how you emotionally feel, is honoring what's going on in your mind, learning mental discernment, and it's honoring the physical boundaries of your body that says no means no, no, don't touch me, or yes, I would love to be touched. A vast majority of people aren't even living in their bodies. They're living in the future or they're living in the past. And when you're in the future or the past in the mind, you're not in your body. So if you're living in the past or the future, how could you ever say yes or no to something and actually know what you've even meant? Because you're not in your body. You don't know what your body is saying yes or no to in that moment. And we're constantly living in the past or the future to avoid feeling what we're experiencing in the now moment, which then creates this reality where everyone's out of their body, everyone's living in a delusional world in their mind because they're not present. The only thing that truly exists in this world is what's present. So they're delusional, they're out of body, and they're emotionally suppressed. That is the recipe for rape culture. That is the recipe for child sex trafficking and human trafficking. That is the recipe for war. That is the recipe for environmental destruction. And if we really want to transcend this, we have to look and really start to cultivate the wisdom within us of how to process our emotions, of how to mentally discern, and how to navigate our conscious and unconscious minds, and how to be fully present in our bodies. And if the vast majority of the collective really anchors in that, really devotes to that, we will see a changed world rapidly. And the only way that's going to happen is if this message here, this conversation continues to be had. So I hope and wish for all of you who are watching this now or in the future that you will continue to have this conversation with others, that you will share this video, or that you will take it and share it in private messages with people if you don't want to put it on your public page. If this is still something that you're, uncomfortable talking about, that's okay. I'll be the one that talks about it, because I don't give a flying fuck what people have to say about me. I care about this planet, and I care about the human species evolving. And this conversation is to be had if that's going to take place. I care about synarchy. I care about unity. And I have no issue, because I have clear energetic boundaries and I have a lot of energetic sovereignty on multiple different dimensions, of having this conversation and having it publicly, so that we can start to have a dialogue about how we can actually impact change on this planet. And it's not going to come through blaming and shaming and guilting and projecting all of our shit, all of our pain onto the opposite sexes. So I appreciate all of you who are willing to have this discussion. If you want to have this discussion with someone, you can always send me a private message. I'd love to be in open dialogue with people about this. Sharing this video is a way to continue to have this message, to have this dialogue, right? Allowing for this conversation to really spread out, because it's important, because our species matters. This planet matters. And I'm getting emotional because I love this planet and I love this species and I love everything that we're available to learn here and to grow here spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Everything that we're able to achieve on this planet is so unique. And it's so important that we recognize that and really start to move in a direction where we are actually able to receive the gifts of being human. And it cannot happen when we're separating, when we're in our victimhood, when we're painting and shaming each other. So this conversation is necessary, and it's going to continue to happen. And I'd love to have this conversation with anyone, and I'd love to share it in more places. So if you know people that want people to start talking about this on their platforms, please send them my way, because this is important. We matter. I thank you all for being here, for being willing to receive this message, even if it's triggered parts of you. And I'm open to having a conversation one-on-one with you as well. You just have to send me a message. Much love to us all. May we all truly know what it feels like to be whole within ourselves, so that we can actually experience what peace truly means. Much love.